Well, like I said, I'm doing some bigger titles this year, and so let's kick off Season 10 right with one of the biggest, 1985's The Return of the Living Dead. The Return of the Living Dead is a true story about an incident that took place in Louisville, Kentucky in 1984. A pair of medical supply company workers, played by James Karen and Tom Matthews, get to talking, and one reveals to the other that Night of the Living Dead actually happened, although not in the way the movie dramatized the events, altered thanks to national security. In the ensuing chaos, some of the drums containing infected bodies were transported to their company instead of to the army, and they've been in the basement ever since. So we've got a world that is both aware of and uses the word zombies. Excellent. I hate when movies pretend that zombies have never been heard of before now. Anyway, time to check out those zombies, and whoops. That's one hell of a cold open, and this music rules. Meanwhile, a multicultural group of punks, including Linnea Quigley, who gets naked a lot, and Jewel Shepard, who doesn't at all, wait in a nearby cemetery for Tom Matthews to end his shift. That doesn't work out well for them thanks to the chemical weapon that's been unleashed next door. Dan O'Bannon of Alien and Dead and Buried fame wrote and directed Return of the Living Dead, and as expected from the late talented writer, it's something special. That whole thing about zombies craving brains, well, here's where it started. Hell, you even get a partial zombie and an amazing puppet explaining rather credibly exactly why they do want brains.
It makes the pain go away.
This was O'Bannon's first directorial job, and some mistakes are made along the way, though. There's some choppy editing here and there, although that might have been an MPAA issue. Also, the ending is, well, it's unique, but I don't know if it entirely works for the story being told. But I can easily overlook O'Bannon's missteps as director because there's just so much to love here. The way that James Karen and Tom Matthews go into instant freaking meltdown is a thing of beauty, and their character arcs are goddamn lunacy. And it's smart how we bounce around through these three main locations, the medical supply company, a funeral home, and the graveyard, all located in the same small area and are all totally relevant to the story. Alright, so here's another one of my embarrassing confessions that seem to pop up now and again over the course of this series. I guess I'd seen the second film in this franchise over a dozen times, and because of its similarities to this one, I figured I'd seen the first one, but now I don't think I had, not outside of basic cable anyway. But also, could this thing have ever even played on basic cable? I don't see how. Linnea Quigley's non-stop nudity would had to have been completely cut out, and that basically means that the punks would just show up later in the second half of the film, unannounced. Also, Tom Matthews' jacket literally just says "fuck you" on it, which again would be an 80s editing nightmare. Now, there are reports on the internet that alternate scenes were shot for the television version, and that they changed the jacket to literally say television version on the back, but I can't find any actual proof of this anywhere. I've seen no photos or video clips to back this up, and from the extra features on the Blu-ray, which I'll talk about in a moment, it sounds like people have gotten a lot of things wrong about the production of this movie over the years. Not saying it doesn't exist, I just can't find any examples of it. The recent Shout Factory release of Return of the Living Dead on Blu-ray is loaded with so many special features, it's going to take you a month to get through them all. Here's a quick look, though. The first disc features 4 commentary tracks for the film. 4! That's 6 hours of commentary. I didn't listen to any of these before doing this review, but definitely will at some point in the future. However, I felt that the extras to come were going to be comprehensive enough. Also on disc 1 is a 23-minute featurette called Decade of Darkness. It's an older DVD extra and a general look at some MGM horror films of the 1980s, with interviews from Elvira, John Landis, Joe Dante, Stuart Gordon, and more. It's edited stupidly, but it's a decent thing. Disc 2 is where things get crazy. You'll want to go straight to the 2-hour documentary called More Brains, A Return to the Living Dead, produced in 2011. It covers just about everything you'd want to know about the film, from the genesis of the idea to its lasting legacy. Almost all of the principal cast and crew members are on hand to share stories about the production, and not all of them are happy ones. There are also a few backhanded comments about Jewel Shepard, who does appear in the interviews but seems, distracted? One thing shown but never explained is this photo of Jason Robards hanging out on set. The hell was he doing there? The best moment comes, though, when the cast was asked about their favorite moment from the production.
Some of my fondest memories was people in their titties.
The FX of Return of the Living Dead is a 33-minute look at some of the special effects and production design work, and while it is mostly information we already heard in More Brains, it's still good to have it here. It does talk about some of the FX work from the finale, which is new info. And just let me say here that the effects throughout Return of the Living Dead look great. The aforementioned puppet is really nifty, as is the Tarman zombie, who has become the iconic creature of this film throughout the years. The music of Return of the Living Dead runs 30 minutes and features interviews with musicians from the soundtrack about contributing to the movie and about their experiences in the music scene from around this time. Horror's Hallowed Grounds is a 10-minute shooting location tour, which is interesting except for the fact that most of the locations no longer exist. Dan O'Bannon's final interview is a 30-minute sit-down with the writer-director. He passed away before More Brains was produced, although an excerpt from this does appear at the end of that documentary. Interestingly, he reveals here that he wasn't a big fan of his own film until much later in life, which, I don't know, that's just surprising. And sad. The Origins of Return of the Living Dead is a 15-minute interview with original Night of the Living Dead co-writer John Russo, who wrote a script for this film until Dan O'Bannon was brought in to start over from scratch. The Dead Have Risen is another DVD carryover. It runs 21 minutes and really doesn't have anything that isn't in More Brains, but again, it's good to have for completionist's sake. Designing the Dead is mainly an older Dan O'Bannon interview, but it features other participants as well. At this point, this is probably the third time you've heard a lot of the information that's given here. Finally, there's a very rough-looking work print version of the film included, and it runs about 30 minutes longer than the final cut. I'll check this out at a later date, much later, because I've been watching Return of the Living Dead content for a year now.
Titties.
But seriously, what a phenomenal package for a movie that absolutely deserves it. The Return of the Living Dead is quintessential 80s horror. I'd go as far as to say it's one of the top 10 horror films of the 80s. It's both important and great, both scary and hilarious, and if you haven't seen it, get yourself a copy of the latest Blu-ray release and party.